Good morning. Welcome to Becoming a Bible Nerd. We are on Acts chapter 24 this morning. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to get your stuff together, to turn to that chapter, and we will get started. We have just a few more weeks left. We are on the home stretch. So those of you that have been keeping up, that's an awesome job because we have covered a lot of stuff. And then for those of you that have gotten busy and life has gotten just hectic and you haven't been able to keep up, the good news is these posts will be up for a year, so you can just do this at your own pace. So this morning, chapter 24, I think that this is a fun chapter. There's a lot of stuff going on. It wasn't long, but there was a lot of stuff. It was jam-packed. And so good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with talking about who Governor Felix is. We left off where the commander in Jerusalem, commander of the Roman army, and we found out his name because he writes a letter to Felix. His name is Claudius Lysias, and this is going to be fun because my dog is wild this morning. I don't know what this is going to be like, but I can't settle her down. Claudius Lysias was the commander of the chief in Jerusalem and a commander of the Roman army, and he couldn't get to the bottom of what the deal is with Paul, and riots kept breaking out, and Paul was a Roman citizen, so he couldn't do anything harmful to him. So he decides, you know what, this has gotten bigger than I can handle. I'm going to send this to the Roman governor of this area. They're called procurators. I can't say the word. But this man, Felix, is the person that is in the position that Pontius Pilate was in. And so he's in Caesarea Maritime, and they send Paul with this huge cavalry, lots of horses, lots of soldiers, to bring him into his custody. And they wait 5 days for this group of the high priest, the elders, and a lawyer, Tertullus, to get there and to present the case. So this chapter is broken up into 3 sections. We hear the prosecution, then Paul gets to offer a defense, and then we see Felix's response. And so we'll go ahead and just get started this morning. So Felix was at one point in time, he was an indentured servant to someone in Rome, and he was free at this time. He had done something to earn and receive freedom, and in this case, it was Emperor Claudius's mother, Antonia. So it was the emperor's mother that he was evidently a slave for and had done something to earn his freedom. So he was the first slave to become a governor of a Roman province. And he rose to power due to his influential brother, his self-serving political maneuvering, and 3 calculated marriages. He married 2 princesses, and then we'll talk about his 3rd wife in a minute. But he knew how to work the system. He was very cruel and abused his power. And if you got in his way, you better watch out. He was unusually cruel to the Jews. He dealt severely with them. And so this is not a good guy. So right off the bat, it's not looking good for Paul. So after 5 days, Tertullus, who is this lawyer, and really the translation for that term lawyer is really breaking down to he was a skilled orator. So he was good at speaking. And so they brought him and they wanted him to present the case. And I'm going to read this first thing to you. Now, this is common in the day to flatter whoever it is that you're talking to, but Tertullus goes overboard. So this is what he says in verse 2. Since we enjoy great peace because of you, and reforms are taking place for the benefit of this nation by your foresight, we acknowledge this in every way and everywhere, most excellent Felix, with utmost gratitude. However, so that I will not burden you any further, I beg you in your graciousness to give us a brief hearing. So he goes overboard, especially on the topic of peace. Actually, this is a gross exaggeration. It's a complete lie. There is peace in the land because of his terroristic ways. And here, Tertullus is just lavishing on. We've experienced peace. It's been so wonderful because of you. He's not a peacemaker, but he's so authoritative that people are in fear. So, but they are pushing peace because that's so important to the Roman Empire, and that is going to be their stance in the prosecution of Paul. They are going to prove that he is not a peacemaker. So they're going on and on about peace right now. In fact, Carrie Prowse came in the office with a little joke. She said Romans were the first hippies. And I was like, I don't understand. And she said they were all about the peace. I thought that was funny. At 5 o'clock this morning, it's really funny. Good morning. It's a wild day in the home already. Hey. So he ends up being, he's going to go against Paul with 3 charges, 1 personal, 1 political, and 1 religious. And so we're going to take a look at the first charge this morning. Got a little book stand here. So we're going to jump to verse 5. And this is what Tertullus says. He says, for we have found this man to be a plague, an agitator among all of the Romans throughout the Roman world. Among all the Jews throughout the Roman world. I'm sorry. I have somebody cuddling on me. Hey, don't knock my stand. You can't put your feet up there. So this first accusation is personal, and he's saying that he's an agitator among the Jews throughout the Roman world. What he is saying is that he is stirring up dissension. Can you go see Daddy? I need you to go see Daddy. And Daddy, if you're on, if you could help me out. So he is stirring up dissension throughout the Roman world. And this is a big deal to Rome, and Tertullus knows this. So he's telling him, look, everywhere he goes, he's stirring up trouble. And this is, they're saying that it's heresy because, here, go see Daddy. I need you to obey. Because the message that he is bringing is one that is stirring up all of this drama. Heresy is the belief or theory that is strongly at odds with established beliefs and customs. So this new news of the gospel is strongly at odds with this old Judaism, and it's causing friction, it's causing riots, and so they're saying that we are charging him with heresy. It's his fault that all of these riots are stirring up. So then his second charge is, I'm so easily distracted, y'all. Bear with me. His second charge is that he is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. This is the only time in the gospel that we hear this, the way Christianity called the sect of the Nazarenes. What Tertullus is trying to do is make it sound as bad as possible. And so he's trying to get it to look like a cult that is outside of mainstream Judaism, and that his point here is saying that this is political treason because it's in direct opposition of Rome. Now follow me here. Paul's message is that Jesus is king, and so they are using that and twisting it and saying, look, he is pushing people to honor this king and not our ruler, Caesar. And so that is political treason because he's this cult of the Nazarene that in Tertullus's explanation, this has nothing to do with Judaism. He's getting people to deny Caesar and to follow Jesus. So his third charge was that he even tried to desecrate the temple, so we apprehended him and wanted to judge him according to our law. But Lysias, the commander, came and took him back with great force, commanding his accusers to come to you. This is true that this is a religious charge of sacrilege, that he defiled the temple by allowing Gentiles to enter, which was completely false. And so these are the 3 charges, and we didn't talk about the letter from the commander last session, but in his letter, Claudius Lysias leaves out all the times that, we almost scourged him. He Claudius is very careful to make himself look like he's just done everything and he's been so kind. Here, Tertullus is trying to make him look bad, saying that he grabbed him with great force, wouldn't let us handle it. We wanted to handle it in Jerusalem, but your commander wouldn't let us. And so I'm sure that if you examine him right now, you're going to quickly see that all three of these charges are strong. And so, of course, Paul gets to give his own defense before Felix. And his flattery is short and sweet. He doesn't go overboard. And he goes straight to the point. And he says, charge number 1, that it is heresy that I stir up dissension everywhere I go. Well, Tertullus said that he does it throughout the Roman world. Here is the problem legally, that Felix does not have jurisdiction to make punishments on things that were outside of his jurisdiction. He can only bring charges for things that Paul did within his own jurisdiction. And so Paul uses that, and he says, well, you were able to determine that I was no more than 12 days. It's been no more than 12 days since I was up to worship in Jerusalem, and they didn't find me disputing with anyone or causing a disturbance among the crowd, either in the temple complex or the synagogues or anywhere else in the city. So he's saying, I've only been here for 12 days. You can ask anyone. I have not debated with anyone. There has been no disturbances in the crowd, which was true. And so therefore, Felix could not charge him with things that happened outside of that jurisdiction. So the next thing was on political treason, that there was this cult that Paul was leading outside of mainstream Judaism, getting people to oppose Caesar and worship Jesus. This was his response to that. I confess to you, I worship my father's God according to the way, which they call a sect, believing all things that are written in the law and the prophets, which was accepted by Rome. He's saying the ancient religion of Judaism that my forefathers had practiced, I believe the same thing. And so that is accepted, and that is not illegal in Rome. And he goes on to say, and he has hope in God, which these men themselves accept, and that he has hope that there's going to be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. This is the only time in the New Testament that this is discussed, that Paul believes, and must be true because it made into the gospel, that there will be a resurrection of the righteous and the unrighteous, and we will both be judged. Christians will be judged according to the good things that we have done, and we will get treasure according to that, and then the unrighteous will be judged according to their bad works. So this, he's saying that he's innocent because he believes the same thing that his forefathers, or the people that are accusing him, believe. And then his third defense for the religious sacrilege in the temple complex, he's saying that after many years I came to bring charitable gifts and offerings to my nation, and while I was doing this, there were some Asian Jews that thought that I brought Gentiles into the temple, which I did not do, and they're the ones that really should be here, and the fact that they weren't here tells the Roman government that they didn't have enough evidence that would stand up in court. And so he's like, really, even the wrong people that were upset with me are here. These people don't even know what was going on. The people that really accused me and think they saw something didn't come. And so he's saying, really, what I'm being charged with today is that I believe in resurrection of the dead. And this is a religious matter that should be held within our own Judaism. And so Felix is, it says in verse 22 that he was accurately informed of the way. So he was familiar of the way, and he basically wants to put off making a decision, which is wise. And so he buys him some time by saying, well, let's just wait until Lysias gets here and I can figure something out. There's no evidence that Lysias ever came, so we don't know what happened, but Felix is buying time, and he is informed of the way because of his third wife. We said earlier that he married 3 times. One of his wives was Cleopatra and Antony's daughter, but this is his third wife that he's married to right now, Drusilla, who is Jewish and possibly a follower of the way, or at least she has been taught about the way. And so this is what we know about her. She was 16 when she married Felix. He stole her away from a king. Let's see. She was married to an Assyrian king whenever Agrippa the first, I'm sorry, she's Herod Agrippa's the first daughter or granddaughter. No, she's the youngest daughter. Ooh, I got messed up this morning. My bearings are off. She's the youngest daughter of Herod Agrippa the first. This is the man, the king, that imprisoned Peter and also approved the execution of James at the beginning of this chapter. She married Felix when she was 16. She's 19 right now. She ends up dying 20 years from this point in Pompeii from her and her son. Pompeii is in Italy, and there was an eruption of a volcano there, and so she died in that. But she was an Idumean, which is a combination of an Edomite and an Israelite, and so she is half Jew, and so she is very familiar with the way, which made Felix familiar of the way. Anyway, Paul is going to be in custody now here under Felix's jurisdiction and in the city for 2 years. And during this time, Felix and Drusilla, I don't know how to say her name accurately, but they like to listen and visit with Paul. And Paul talks to them about Jesus being the Christ, and he talks about 3 things. He talks about righteousness and Jesus' death, how that is necessary for us to live righteous lives. He talks about self-control, which is once you believe and you become a follower of Jesus, you get his Holy Spirit inside of you, and all of a sudden fruit of the Spirit will develop, and people will know that you're a Christian by your fruit, and holiness will develop. And he talks about the coming judgment. And Felix becomes uneasy with this, and he ends up going away from Paul when Paul starts talking about these things. And this is what I love about studying with other people, because in this section, I really focused on what Paul did, like in my study, thinking about what Paul did during those 2 years and how, even though he's in prison, he utilized his time wisely. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But whenever we're in study group, one of my study partners, Lana, who taught this, she really focused on, the Lord really spoke to her about this Felix, the section where Felix is so uneasy when he's hearing about righteousness, self-control, and judgment. So I'm going to just read a summary that she gave us. And I love when she teaches, because it's like she teaches, like you can tell that she is just soaked in everything that she has studied. And she's so passionate when she talks, but I wish that I could read this in the same passion that she did. But this is what she summarized in this section. Felix became uneasy when Paul started talking about sin, righteousness, and judgment, because he and Drusilla were deficient in these areas. He was willing to discuss theology, but not personal morality or personal responsibility. A lot of people postpone a relationship with God because they can't handle looking inwardly at themselves. They may even listen to the gospel, but once you touch too close to their lives, they run. I experienced this personally in my own life here recently. I've been kind of dealing with maybe mentioning this in class, because I believe in James, it says to confess your sins one to another so that you can be prayed for and receive healing. And I have been struggling for quite some time with unforgiveness, and it's something I'm not proud of, and it's something I've been trying to overcome. But I was gravely hurt a couple of years ago by some ongoing things that somebody close to us had said about us, and it's just been hard for me to get over it. And studying this chapter, you never see any bitterness in Paul's life. Like, he is accused and wrongly treated, and he just lets it roll off his back, and he just presses on. He doesn't show any animosity or unforgiveness or bitterness. And I had recently gone to a conference, because we canceled 1 week 2 weeks ago when I was at the conference, and it was such an amazing conference. And you just one of those that you're taking notes constantly, you're moved. And a man came up, and his discussion was on unforgiveness. And so when we got home a couple of days later, my husband came up to me and was like, "Can I talk to you about something?" I was like, "Sure." He said, that conference, when he knew him by name, I don't even know his name, that tells you how much I checked out. He said, the moment he started talking, you got on your phone and got on social media and checked out. And I knew exactly, I was uncomfortable during that message, and it made me want to retreat. I didn't want to look inwardly. And, that's what so many people do when we're sharing the gospel with them. They're not ready for that. It makes them uncomfortable because it's this flesh and this spirit that are at battle. And sometimes our flesh is stronger. And especially if you're not a believer, then there's nothing but flesh there. And so when the spirit comes in and brings conviction, they resist it. And that's exactly what Felix was doing. So he retreated, but there were still visits during this 2-year time. And he is eventually going to get replaced by another man, and we will talk about that next week. But I want to talk a minute about just the fact that Paul was under house arrest for 2 years. You don't see prison doors opening. You don't hear about an earthquake at night that set him free, but he is here for 2 years under arrest, and he makes the very most of his time. He's allowed to have visitors. So many scholars believe that Luke was right by his side during this time, and that Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and Acts during this 2-year period of visiting Paul and hearing the account. Because remember, Luke wasn't there, but he would go and visit with Paul and learn about all of these things, and he was documenting it. It's also suspected that Paul did some of his writings during this time, some of his letters. And so just thinking about how God has this big plan and destiny for Paul to end up in Rome. And whenever he gets to Rome, that is going to shake the face of the earth. Right now, Rome still is the center of Christianity, the Pope being there. And that is where, from that point forth, is where really it ushered to the outermost part, the gospel ushered to the outermost parts of the world. But God's design was for 2 years for Paul to be in prison. He made the most of it. We said last week that it was persecution in prison that prepared him for his purpose. And so he took full advantage of this entire time in prison to get ready for what God had in store for him. We see Joseph. I compared Paul to Joseph. He had the coat of many colors. His dad liked him the best. His brothers threw him in a cistern, and then he was sold into slavery to Egypt, and he was in prison for 13 years. And but God's plan was to get him out of prison and to become the right-hand man to Pharaoh. And we don't have time to go into the rest of the story, but it was a huge destiny that God had. And I think that some of us might feel like we're in prison. It might be that you're a stay-at-home mom and you feel like that you don't really have any encounter with the outside world. You're just taking care of little kids and no one to talk to right now. Maybe your job is miserable, or maybe you just got laid off, or you just retired and everything about your life as you knew it has changed. Maybe you're new to town and you don't know anyone. Maybe you're homesick. The list could go on and on, but you might, in this season of your life, feel like you're in a stagnant place, that you are just stuck. And I just encourage you to make the most of this time, because God could be preparing you for your purpose. And so we're going to look for a minute. While in prison, Paul and Luke wrote, and Paul ended up later going to Rome. While in prison, Joseph interpreted dreams for 13 years, and he ended up right-hand man of Pharaoh for 40 years. Moses was in prison. He was in isolation in the wilderness after it had been caught that he killed an Egyptian. So he herded sheep for 40 years. He learned how to herd. He learned how to shepherd so that he could go back to Egypt and shepherd a group of people into the promised land. David was in the caves of Adullam between the time that he was a boy and he was supposed to be king. So in those caves, he wrote songs and he praised God, and later became the greatest king Israel has ever seen. And the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness grumbled and complained. So you see that these, and most of them did not make it into the promised land. It was the next generation that got to go. So while we were in our time of waiting, our time of disappointment, we have to make the most of it, because God is preparing us for something amazing. And it's a process to work through pain. It's free from distractions, and it's to get a greater depth of use and anointing for whatever it is that God's created us. So today, I encourage you, make the most of this season. We will pick up next week. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a good weekend, and happy reading.